Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. This is Dr. Elsie Coe. I am the CEO and founder of Lead Physician. We're talking today about stepping into leadership. And how do you do that? Well, it requires a growth mindset. And what does that mean? And we have somebody here who embodies this from the beginning. How did she become a very shy introvert from a different country, come to the US, and rise up to becoming chief? And along the way, she hit so many milestones and she continues to do so. So I think it's very important for us to talk to her again. Before I go there, I just want to tell you, Lead Physician has all of these different platforms on YouTube. So go to my YouTube if you want to hear a lot of this content that could help you with your leadership, entrepreneurial skills. There's a lot of great content from physicians and other leaders who have interviewed to learn about how this. And this is all free. So go subscribe and share that with your colleagues. Okay. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Asha Padmanabhan. How are you doing? Good seeing you again.
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Elsie.
Yes, and we've brought her on before, and just to remind you guys, she's a board certified anesthesiologist, and she's held multiple she's held multiple leadership position and is a medical director right now. Over the last 10 years, she's done a lot of different leadership positions. We'll talk about in a minute. She's also a master certified development coach and the owner of Leadership RX Coaching. So tell us, Asha, thank you so much for being here. That you wrote this book, and that's why I brought you back. And this just got published, and now everyone can get this on. I believe Amazon. That's where I got my book. And Asha is one of the new doctors in a series of book that Dr. Deborah Shillian has put together on lessons learned, stories from women physician leaders. And when I read the chapter that Dr. Asha Padmanabhan put together, I knew I had to bring her back to the podcast because you embody such an amazing story and growth mindset. I think people need to read about it because we can all learn from you. Can you talk about why you put this story in there and why you volunteered to do this?
Sure. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure because I follow your journey and what you do, and it's such important work,
Oh, thank you.
especially because I think both of us are very passionate about getting more women physicians into leadership. That's my vision, that's my mission, and I know that resonates so much with you. So it's a pleasure to be back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and thank you for writing this chapter. So you said how you were a very very shy introvert and wouldn't
Mhm.
network, wouldn't kept
Mhm.
your head buried, and suddenly like you transformed. How did you
Mhm.
transform into becoming even chief, and then even president of the Florida Society of Anesthesiologists? Let's talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the secretary in line to be president in about
Oh,
3 years, but that's a 7 year
amazing!
journey. It's a seven
Yes,
year journey. So, how I got started, I mean, like many women physicians, mine was an accidental step into leadership. But looking back now, at the time, I thought it was very accidental and I wasn't prepared. But looking back now, it's almost like I knew I had it in me, but I was holding back because I was a shy introvert. And when that position opened up and there didn't seem to be anyone else available at that time, I felt like I had to do it. But then learning from that, I learned to not just speak up, but also the most important lesson I learned was to find people to help me to learn from,
yes.
because it was a treasurer role, which I had absolutely no idea what that meant.
Right, but
And
before you even went to find somebody,
yeah.
you had to have a certain kind of mindset, and we're talking about a growth mindset. And
Yeah.
I see that in you when I read that chapter. Tell us
Hmm.
about like how you think even when opportunity comes. And you call it luck, or you might call it, a just so happenstance or whatever. But really another person who got the same kind of opportunity might not have reacted the way you did.
Yes. So I've always been interested in learning more and doing more within whatever parameters I was in. And so it's always, I'm fascinated by learning new things and figuring out how things work. So that's where that comes in. I think it's because, yes, this opportunity presented itself, but I could have let my other partner pick it up.
Yes.
Was willing and who was willing at the time.
Right.
But I felt like if I didn't step up, then I would lose the opportunity to learn something new. And even though I was scared to do it, I felt like I owed it to myself to at least try.
Right. Like
And
when your first practice, when you were partner and then they needed a treasurer and you're like, I'll do it. And then you're like, wait a minute. Did I just say that?
yeah,
That the fact that you stepped up like that and then figured it out. Tell us
yeah.
about that story.
Yeah, and so yeah, exactly that way. And then if you read through the chapter, that parallels the rest. Everything that I did is, let me try it, and then I'll see if I fail or succeed. Even the chief position in anesthesia, I didn't feel like I had any qualifications for it.
Right.
Yet I applied for that because I felt like, what do I have to lose? And that is part of it as
What
well.
do I have to lose?
What do I have to lose?
Yeah.
I mean,
And you know what?
otherwise,
Yep. And then you did it. And then, suddenly you become a lot more valuable in the open market. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but suddenly you're seen as more than a doctor. And you
mhm.
know what? It's just it's not like rocket science, right? Would you say it was rocket science to learn how to
No,
do that?
no, and we've gone through years and years of medical school, so we know how to learn. We know how to be a good learner,
Hmm.
and that's all it is finding the right teachers and learning how to do it. And
Hmm.
again, coming back to it's what do you have to lose? It's kind of like when I felt very alone in my position. I reached out, cold emailed a bunch of female physicians, and that was
That
hard
that was an
because
amazing story. Yeah.
I,
And then you did it again in Florida.
yes.
So Asha, you're the epitome of what we need to of what physicians in general, especially those who didn't get leadership training, and maybe the younger ones are getting it now, but we need to be able to say, you know what, people do this all the time,
Mhm.
and just because I didn't have this before, and we had such structured training, and we're supposed to be the experts, doesn't mean that I can just stick my foot out and see. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, what's the worst thing that can happen, right?
That's right. Exactly. You learn something from it and you move on. And you could have failed. It's like I failed 4 times before I got into that position in the Florida board. But I learned something every time. I learned the first time I wasn't ready. I learned the second time I wasn't ready. By the fourth time, I was ready.
Right. So how many of you out there would actually run for a position on a public board of the Florida Society of Anesthesiologists, right?
Mhm.
And fail, but show up the fourth time. I don't think that many physicians would do that. What allowed you? What pushed you to try again? Just take us through those steps.
So by that point, it was more because the board knows this. By this time, there were no women physicians on that board at that point. And I felt like I owed it to every other women physician here in Florida, anesthesiologist, to try my best to get on the board. Because if I didn't try then, it would be several more years before someone else felt like they wanted to even try. And so I felt like I owed it to other women physicians.
You felt accountable.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Right. Well, so the first time you said, I didn't know much about it. I just tried to sign up and then I realized I didn't know what I didn't know. And then the
Mhm.
second time you knew a little bit more, but you really didn't network with anyone. And I
No.
think by the fourth time you reached out to people and
Yes.
asked them to help you win. Is
Yes.
that correct?
That's exactly right. Until the third time around, I was, we tend to be let people see what we do and come help us, but that doesn't work. That really does not work. Do
Right.
your stuff, but show people what you're doing and ask. And that fourth time around, I did ask. I did ask for feedback. I asked for opinions, and I asked people if they were willing to support me, which I'd never done before, which
Wow.
was really stepping out of my comfort zone in that
Right.
point.
And when you step out of your comfort zone, that means you're growing.
Yes.
Let's just remember that feeling should become comfortable. Like we always say, getting comfortable, feeling uncomfortable. So tell us, what are your big main points you think from this podcast in terms of a physician developing a growth mindset to be able to step into leadership? What
Mhm.
would those be?
I think the first thing would be don't be afraid of failure.
Hmm.
Don't not try anything because you're afraid that you would show up as incompetent or immature or any of those things, we think about ourselves, right? We think that we are not ready for this. There's someone else more qualified. And so we don't even step out. So the first thing would be step out, even if you think you would fail. The second thing would be ask for help and support. Most of what I've achieved since I started on this journey has been by asking other people how they did it and then learning from them and then applying that. So none of us is an island. We all need to help each other and we need to reach out for support because there are many people willing to support you if you only ask. I think,
Yes.
yeah, being embarrassed to ask is something we all are, but stepping out of that is what is going to get you further.
And you know what? I think also that you're the epitome of showing us how to be persistent despite failure. And failure
Mhm.
is just a stepping stone. You're showing us to growth that you learn from those. They're just setbacks that are basically teaching points,
Mhm.
and you learn from each time you failed being getting on that board.
Yeah, and I think I didn't take it personally. That was the other thing. I did
Aha.
not take it personally.
Don't take it personally.
Mhm.
There's some really good books that people can read when regard to growth mindset. There's one by Carol Dweck
Yes.
on growth mindset. I think if you want to know more about it, but there's also a book by Miguel Ruiz on the four agreements, and
Mhm.
I love that because it's so true to leadership. And one of them is don't take things personally,
Mhm.
because and we do that with our egos, um, and we're allowed to have big egos because we've accomplished so much, but then we become perfectionists, and then we're really hard on ourselves. So let me just reiterate those things, and I think just based on what we just talked about, I wrote this down very quickly, and that's what I love about StreamYard is don't be afraid of failure, ask for help, and persistence is okay. It's okay. You're just getting feedback when you fail, and don't take things personally. Does that summarize everything you think?
That is right. And the one last thing I would want to add for, especially for women physicians listening here, is take that first step because we feel like we are either too busy with family or too busy with work to not even look at leadership. But I really would encourage everyone, join that first committee, one committee. It can be 1 hour or less every couple of months, but do that, join that, because that's how you're going to grow, and that's how you're going to have your voice heard in your hospital. Because if your voice is not heard, just imagine your life, your career is being held hostage by someone else.
Yep,
So
and you know what? I just
yeah.
got off a coaching call with a client, and she was in a role for 2.5 years, and she's already looking for other jobs, but yet she never even asked the current boss of where growth can happen for her within that organization. And
Mm,
turns out she doesn't really dislike that organization, it's just that she sees no growth, but she never asked.
mhm.
And women tend to not ask until they feel like they're 99.9% ready.
Yes,
Right?
don't do that.
Don't do that. Just ask and take that first step. It's you'd be amazed what could potentially happen. Thank you so much, Asha, for this. Again, all the time when you come, you bring in such rich information, and I really appreciate it. If anyone has a story you want to share on this platform, please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. info@drlcco.com. And if you are ready for some leadership, check us out at leadphysician.org and inquire about that there. Any last words of advice for us, Asha?
Keep listening to Dr. Elsie.
No, from you. We're inspired by you. Thank you. Turn the tables are on me there. So thank you everyone for listening. Until next Sunday, we'll
Sure,
see
and
you.
read that book. There are 33 wonderful stories in there. So
Yes, let me show that one more time, okay? Please pick up this book, Lessons Learned, Stories from Women Physician Leaders. There was another anesthesiologist in there. There are people from different generations, so very so many different backgrounds, very diverse, and highly recommended. Thank you for writing that chapter, Asha, and inspiring us.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for having
everyone.
me
Take
here.
care.